What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing. The Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series will continue its conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. Now, the image on your screen is a World Middleweight Championship contest that's about to begin. On your right is the Michigan assassin, Stanley Ketchel. And on your left is the Illinois Thunderbolt, Billy Papke. Man in the middle was the former world heavyweight champion, Boilermaker Jim Jeffries. Now, if you take a look at Billy Papke, man on your left's attire, it could be mistaken as a protective foul cup that you would wear in sparring. Well, since they didn't have those during that time, one can only believe that would be a G-string of some kind. And Stanley Ketchel said, "I'm not going in the ring with this man wearing such attire." But once he found out he would not be paid, his title could possibly be at stake. Well, those thoughts quickly were removed from his conscious decision. On the night of October 17, 1910, bantamweight Digger Stanley knocks out Joe Cowper in 8 rounds in London, United Kingdom. Now, Digger Stanley that evening would become England's bantamweight champion. Who was Digger Stanley? He was born February 28, 1883, in Norfolk, United Kingdom. He stood 5 foot 5.5 inches, fought 1,069 rounds, well over 113 bouts. Some of his opponents were Peddler Palmer, who, by the way, we'll talk about him because he was in a tournament. We'll talk about him as the series goes on. Tommy O'Toole. Stanley would become the European Boxing Union's bantamweight champion. If you don't know much about Digger Stanley, look him up. He was a proud fighter from England, well respected, and a very good fighter. Shout out to Digger Stanley. On October 24th, world featherweight champion Little Hebrew defends his title against Johnny Kilbane in 10 rounds. Little Hebrew, as we know, is Abe Patel. Just want to make that clear. And this bout took place in Kansas City, Missouri. On November 13th of that year, Abe Patel would retain his World Featherweight Championship title in 15 rounds. It would become a draw against a former fighter of his contemporary. He faced this man a few times before this bout. And his name was Frankie Conley. And they fought in Los Angeles. On November 28th, lightweight Owen Moran drops and floors battling Nelson 5 times in the 11th round alone. It was the only 10 count that battling Nelson would suffer in his career. December 20th, world lightweight champion, 24-year-old Freddie Welch would defeat United Kingdom's 30-year-old featherweight Jim Driscoll for the European Boxing Union lightweight championship contest. The contest took place in Cardiff after Driscoll went down in the 4th round. And he was disqualified with a controversial headbutt. That would end the contest between those two men. On January 10th, 1911, Sam Langford, who's the world colored heavyweight champion, defeats West Hoboken's Joe Jeanette. The contest took place in Boston Arena, and Joe Jeanette would lose in 12 rounds. Joe Jeanette was dropped in the first round for an 8 count, but he would make it to 12, and the decision would go to the Boston Bone Crusher, Sam Langford. That would be one of 14 contests between those two men. And Joe Jeanette would hold his own. Now, Jeanette would be in the ring with Jack Johnson 7 times. I don't know in previous videos if I mentioned that he was in the ring with Jack Johnson 14 times. Any of those times that I've mentioned 14 times, scrap that. I've always been thinking about Sam Langford. Joe Jeanette and Sam Langford was in the ring with one another 14 times. Joe Jeanette and Jack Johnson was in the ring 7 times. So if I've ever said that before, please scratch that. But Joe Jeanette, the Iron Man of West Hoboken, was an outstanding fighter. They named the street after him. I've always had the highest regards and respect for Joe Jeanette. We're going to talk about him individually, as we'll talk about Sam Langford, as we'll talk about Sam McVeigh. We discussed Jack Johnson and Joe Gans, but we'll get to all those fighters individually as well. January 25th of 1910, welterweight Harry Hairpin Lewis knocks out Johnny Somerton 4 rounds in London. February 28th, bantamweight Johnny Coolin, great fighter, defeats Frankie Colney in a 20-round bantamweight championship contest in New Orleans, Louisiana. In fact, we'll talk about Johnny Coolin as well. Have some very interesting things to share about him. February 27th of 1910, the British lightweight champion, Matt Wells, defeats Freddie Welch, 20-round contest in London, England. It's for the British lightweight championship belt. And what a fight that was. Now going back, February 26th, Frankie Conley of Italy is defeated by Canadian's Johnny Colan, 20 rounds, New Orleans. It was to unify the World Bantamweight Championship title. Now Johnny Colan, his name was John Frederick Colan. He was known as the cherry picker of Logan Square. He was born February 12, 1889 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He fought from 1905 to 1920. He was a bantamweight champion. And he was 5 feet tall. But this young man could punch. Now as for Frankie Conley, his name was Francesco Conte. He was born October 4th, 1890, in Italy as well. And what was interesting about him, now he died August 21st, 1952 in Wisconsin. But he was 5 foot 5.5 inches. He was a bantamweight, fought from 1905 to 1923. What was interesting about him, he was given several title opportunities. And he's always done well in all the contests that he participated in. Johnny Colan would become the paperweight champion. And this is what I wanted to tell you that was interesting about him, of the world. He presented his claim as the world champion, weighing 115 pounds, against Earl Denning at the National Athletic Club in Memphis, Tennessee. And that's very interesting because he presented a claim of 115 pounds. And that's below bantamweight. But it showed you how hungry, how determined these fighters were during that time. On March 17th, the world lightweight champion, Ad Wargas, had knocked out George Mystic in 9 rounds. And he holds on to his world lightweight championship title in Vernon, California, at the Vernon Arena. After referee Charles Eiton would proudly award the Michigan Wildcat, who was Ad Wargas, of his victory, both combinations were arrested. They were illegally fighting an anti-prize fight law during that time. Now, both of these combination fighters were told beforehand that this could happen. And they took a chance anyway. But Ad Wargas, his name was Adolfo Wargas. He was known as the Michigan Assassin. He was born February 8, 1899 in Cardiff, Michigan. He died April 14, 1955. He was 67 years of age at the time of his death. And he would reside in Cardiff, Michigan. He stood 5 foot 4.5 inches. He was a lightweight, fought from 1906 to 1920. Ad Wargas was the fighter, and we'll get to that. He would face Mexican Joe Rivers. And you heard me mention a referee by the name of Jack Welch. Well, Jack Welch would be hired by Ad Wargas. He would be his personal referee because Ad Wargas had the business handed to him as well from another referee. And he said, it's not going to happen to me again. So wherever Ad Wargas fought moving forward, Jack Welch was the referee for that contest. And that's how Mexican Joe Rivers got caught up in that mess when both men were knocked out at the same time. And the referee Jack Welch would help up Ad Wargas as he was counting out Mexican Joe Rivers. On the night of Friday, March 31st, World Lightweight Champion Ad Wargas would knock out Anton LaGraves in San Francisco, California. Now, he was born January 24th, 1887. He was 24 years of age at the time that he would defeat and agree to this contest. Both men would meet, and they would agree to fight at 133 pounds. That was the limit. It was in defense of the Lightweight Championship contest in San Francisco, California. It was at the San Francisco Pavilion Auditorium. The referee was Jack Welch, and he was stopped about in the 5th round. I wonder why. On Saturday, April 1st, World Colored Heavyweight Champion, Boston Bone Crusher, Sam Langford defends his title against Sam McVeigh at the Paris, France arena. 28-year-old Langford drew 20 rounds with 26-year-old McVeigh in defense of his crown. The referee was Eugene Corr. He could not decide, so he decided to make a draw and award Langford the title. Now, this happened a lot during those years because the referee was either threatened or he would become what is considered unpopular if he made the wrong decision. So most of the time, he would reward the champion his title by making it a draw. On Saturday, May 27th, World Lightweight Champion, 23-year-old Ad Wargas, once again defends his crown by knocking out 20-year-old Frankie Burns of Oakland, California. It was on 8th Street Arena in San Francisco, California. 17 rounds. The bout was scheduled for 20. On June 8th, two-time world middleweight champion Billy Papke was known as the Illinois Thunderbolt. He knocks out Jim Sullivan. The referee Eugene Corr stopped the bout. He stopped it in the 9th round that was scheduled for 20, London, United Kingdom. It was claimed the British version of the World Middleweight Championship contest. Now, Papke defended his claim as World Middleweight Champion, although he would lose to Celebrity at the St. Nicholas Arena in New York. The St. Nicholas Arena is on 66th Street. Well, it was across the street from the famous Lincoln Center. St. Nicholas Arena used to be an ice skating palace, so they would convert that in the evening and shift it to boxing at night. And that's where the World Lightweight Champion, Benny Leonard, would suffer a heart attack and he would collapse and die in his 6th bout that he refereed that evening. It was in 1947. We talked about Benny Leonard. We would discuss him as he became the World Lightweight Champion in 1917 when he would defeat Freddie Welch. Benny Leonard was an outstanding fighter. On August 15, the Boston Bone Crusher Sam Langford would knock out Philadelphia Jack O'Brien as referee Charlie White would count and stop the bout. 2 minutes into the 5th round, he would prevent an official knockout of the 20th I laugh because this is what happens. Now I regard Charlie White as the top two. Some can argue the best referee, and I would not disagree with that. Charlie White was an outstanding referee. He really was. He refereed just about the greatest fights of the late 1800s, early 1900s. Many of them. He was a stand-up referee. But this happened. He didn't allow Sam Langford, to be awarded of an official knockout over Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. Now, he stopped Jack O'Brien in 6 rounds in 1911. And what is interesting about it, Jack O'Brien would later on say in his memoir that Sam Langford was probably the hardest puncher he's ever faced. And he was in there with all of them. But boxing is boxing. And that was very interesting, to say the least. August 15th, world colored heavyweight champion Sam Langford was known as the Boston Bone Crusher. He would knock out former world light heavyweight champion Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. And he stopped him in 6 rounds. Now, here's the deal. When you look at boxing, for what boxing truly is, you can have a very good understanding of what you're dealing with. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. He was born as Joseph Francis Anthony Hogan, January 17th, 1878, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He stood 5'10.5". He was a light heavyweight. Became champion December 20th, 1905, when referee Eddie Graney had counts out world light heavyweight champion at that time, Bob Fitzsimmons, who was 42 years of age, just to keep in mind. He stopped him in the 13th round. O'Brien was 37 years old, and he weighed 168 pounds. Fitzsimmons weighed 158 pounds. Very interesting between those two men. Now, he would face Jack Twin Sullivan April 14th, 1904, for the claimant of Fitzsimmons' title. September 14th, Norfolk, United Kingdom. The bantamweight Digger Stanley would defeat Liverpool's flyweight Ike Young Bradley. 20 rounds in Liverpool Stadium on Purdy Street. The referee was J.T. Holtz. He was a junior. He awards the contest in favor of Digger Stanley. It was the EEU, European Bantamweight title. It was for the BB of C British Bantamweight Championship title. The program was billed at the British and European Bantamweight Championship contest of Lonsdale belt was not on the line. And Lonsdale belt, Henry Cooper, I believe, had the last one. I could be wrong. But boxing during those years in England was very special, because that's where boxing would begin. And many of those fighters don't get the credit they so justly deserve. But the rules and the laws began there. And a lot of those great fighters are no longer around. It would be in the best interest of fighters of England today to study those fighters. You had some magnificent ones. Oh. As my dad and I spoke about boxing, minute for minute, day by day. We talked about all the countries: Australia, England, United States of America, Canada. And we always dug deep into the stars of the game, the rules of the game, what was happening at its time based on the conversation that we were having. We had a lot of fun in those conversations. Finally, September 15th, heavyweight fireman Jim Flynn, who stood 5'9". He faced 6'4", Fulton, Kentucky's Carl Morris. He fought him for 10 rounds. It was a no-decision contest at New York's Madison Square Garden. The white heavyweight championship title was not at stake. Carl Morris was a champion of that title. And Carl Morris' right side of his face was completely disfigured. Broken eye socket, broken jaw, broken nose. No one in Morris's camp tried to repair his vision. Fireman Jim Flynn didn't punch that hard. You see, boxing has always been what it is. And you have to examine fights on a fight-by-fight basis to really know what went on in the game. Carl Morris, who was he? He was born February 23rd, 1884 in Fulton, Kentucky. He would die July 11th, 1951 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He stood 6'4", had an 81-inch reach, fought from 1910 to 1922, would have a record of 72 total bouts, 53 wins, 15 losses, 41 knockouts. He was stopped 5 times. And Morris fought the likes of heavyweights such as Tut Jackson and Marvin Hart, Fireman Jim Flynn, Jess Willard, Dan Porky Flynn, Tony Ross, Frank Moran, Jim Coffey, Fred Fulton, Jack Dempsey. He lost to him 3 times. September 28th, 1917, he faced St. Paul's Billy Misk, lost in 10 rounds. We'll be talking about Billy Misk as he was a very interesting figure in boxing as well. His story is very touching, and we'll speak about him as we get closer to his career, facing the Jack Dempseys and the Bill Brennans, etc. October 28th, the Oxnard Cyclone, Sam McVeigh, knocks out heavyweight Bill Lang. The referee was Snowy Baker, and he counts out Lang in the 2nd round. The contest was scheduled for 20 rounds. Sam McVeigh is the Australian heavyweight champion of the world. Now, thousands have filled Sydney Stadium. Sam McVeigh, who was he? Samuel E. McVeigh, the Oxnard Cyclone, born May 17, 1884. He was actually born in Texas, but he did most of his work, most of his life was in Oxnard, California. And he stood 5'10.5". He was a heavyweight, had a 75-inch reach. Fought from 1902 to 1921. He would end his career with a record of 102 total bouts, 76 wins, 13 losses, 62 knockouts, and he was stopped 5 times. I've ever mentioned Sam McVeigh, born in California. He was born in Texas, and he was raised and resided in California. So if I ever made that mistake, please forgive me. The Oxnard Cyclone was called that because he was raised and he did all his work in Oxnard, California, but he was born in Texas. Just want to be clear. Now, he was in the ring with fighters such as Jeff Clark. Faced him 7 times. 5 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss. Sam Langford, 5 no-decision contests, 4 draws, 4 losses, and 1 win. Was in the ring with him 15 times. Harry Wills, 5 losses, 1 no decision, and 1 win. That's it for me. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Boxing has so much information of its past. It is a rich history. It has characters that will tell a story through their contest in the world of pugilism. Although human, but they were characters of the time, such as the Stanley Ketchells, such as the Billy Papkes, Jim Jeffries, Jack Johnsons. Many of these men told a story through their actions. And we'll have fun going through the lives and stories of these men as we continue the complete history of boxing. Thanks for listening, and be well. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series, where all great fights and all great fighters would never be forgotten on my channel. Peace.